There's massive escalation in the war in Iran. An F-15 fighter jet of the Americans has been shot down inside Iran. Big story coming in. US media has now confirmed an F-15E Striking Eagles fighter jet has been shot down in Iran. According to Iranian media, an American fighter pilot may be in the custody of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. In fact, we'll show you some of the images right now that are coming in from Iran. According to initial reports, this is an F-15E. It's a Striking Eagle fighter jet. It's been shot down over southern Iran. The fighter jet was reportedly downed by the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The pilot managed to eject, but he was deep inside Iranian territory. As soon as that emergency locator beacon, it triggered a signal. The United States is now sending in its aircraft. I'm told Apache helicopters, C-130J aircraft. There are other aircraft. There are other surveillance aircraft. There are Heptas that are going in, trying to hunt for this pilot. The Iranian news agencies are reporting that US forces attempted to extract the pilot from deep inside Iranian territory. There's a combat search and rescue operation that's been mounted, but that mission hasn't succeeded so far. Iranian authorities and agencies are on ground zero. Apparently, there was some hostile fire. The American aircraft have now moved back. US media has also confirmed the sighting during the search of the search and rescue operation that's currently underway. The image that you see on your television screen, one part of it is the tail fin of the downed aircraft. The other part is the ejection seat. The IRGC on Friday announced that a second F-35 fighter jet was destroyed in the skies over central Iran, but this has been denied by the United States Central Command. In the first phase of the war, early phase of the war, the Iranian forces had said that they downed an F-35. Now that's the most modern fifth generation stealth fighter. However, the Americans conceded, or at least some reports from the United States seem to indicate that the aircraft was winged, but the pilot managed to land back safely. In this instance, in the current instance, the F-15E that was shot down. Now, this is very alarming because this would actually change the dynamics of the war. Every decision that US President Donald Trump may want to take may be impacted by the thought that there's a fighter pilot in the custody of the Iranians. This hasn't officially been confirmed. There are some news agencies that say locals rushed to that area and they recovered the fighter pilot. There are other reports that seem to indicate that there you see that image of the ejection seat that's lying there. The other image that you saw just before that plane crashed, it fired, that's another aircraft that's firing flares and chaffs because even as the C-130 goes in, you can see that's a turboprop aircraft that's going in for search and rescue. Should there be man-pads or man-portable surface-to-air missiles that Iranians still continue to fight? So it's firing flares and chaffs to ensure that it can dodge those incoming surface-to-air missiles. I quickly want to bring in my colleague Sandeep Unnithan for more on the story. Sandeep, very preliminary information just as yet, since this is just being reported. What more can you tell us? What more have you been able to pick up?
Well, Gaurav, those visuals that you just saw on the screen are an HC-130J Combat King II. It's a version of the C-130J Hercules, which the Indian Air Force also operates. And that is part of the combat search and rescue teams of the United States. As you can see, it's firing those flares, as you said, to decoy man-pads or anything that could be aimed at it. And this points to the fact that the US believes that there is a pilot in the vicinity, and they have some of the most formidable CSAR platforms, specially designed. They are crews that are designed, they're trained and especially equipped to pick up enemy, pilots that are downed in enemy territory. That's why it's called combat search and rescue, which means they not only have the ability to search and rescue and pick up the pilots, but also fight their way through enemy territory. So a typical aircraft like the Combat King that you see over there would act as a command platform. It flies over an area where a pilot is down. It refuels helicopters that fly on with them. So each Combat King 2 carries refueling pods to, simultaneously refuel two paveway helicopters, Pave Hawk helicopters. Those helicopters land on the ground with commandos, with para jumpers, and then they start looking for the pilots. They safely extract him and bring him back. So it's a
this
very
is one of the riskiest operations.
It is, Gaurav. It is possibly one of the most riskiest operations because, unlike special forces operations which are carried out in utter stealth, combat SAR is a very, very tough call because the enemy will be expecting CSAR thing exactly as you've seen. That's the reason that they were firing those flares, because they know they're extremely vulnerable. They're being picked up by civilian, smartphone and quite easily enemy radars as well. So it is extremely hazardous flying into enemy territory with those,
this is
Hepters.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And for the latest information that's coming in, the Americans are scared that the pilot may have been captured. There's no official word on this just as yet. An American pilot flying a mission over the southern part of Iran, his plane was shot down, and that pilot may have been captured. Some in the Iranian media, at least there are two agencies that claim that that pilot was captured and is in the custody of the IRGC. But there's no official word just as yet from the IRGC. And the other image, these of course are much older images that you're seeing of the friendly fire of the F-15 that brought down the 3 F-15s earlier. I want to focus just on today's picture for the moment. Those are pictures of the C-130 that's carrying out a combat search and rescue operation and firing flares just now. There's more breaking news coming in. I quickly want to cut across to this breaking news. The governor of the southwestern Iranian province has said whoever captures or kills the crew of the downed US jet will be specially commended by the governorate of the southwest province. Now, this gives you the first indication, perhaps, that the pilot has still not been captured by the Iranian authorities. Because, Sandeep, this message that's just coming out from the governor of the southwestern province, who says whoever captures or kills the crew of the downed US jet will be commended by the governor's office. First indication that that pilot could still be out there, perhaps still in harm's way, but not captured yet.
Yeah, absolutely, Gaurav. And an F-15 Strike Eagle, if that is indeed the aircraft that went down, has two pilots. So it's a bomb truck, it's a fighter bomber, and if they did eject, it would be two pilots, and they would possibly be, they would have hidden themselves, waiting for the rescuers to reach them, and that explains, the urgency with which the combat search and rescue is underway, and possibly the US would have pushed in more special forces over there to try and recover the pilots, because this is something that you do not want to give the enemy, that is one of your pilots, because that pilot will then be paraded, will be forced to say things on television. As we've seen in the past, it's happened, several times. They would not want that pilot to be taken as a prize.
But just take a look at the situation. Yes. The ejection seat, the image of the ejection seat. Now, in the fog of war, there's a lot of psychological warfare. There are older pictures from elsewhere that may be put there. So these are images that have been released by media in Iran. The images that you see, whether it's that aircraft that's firing flares or that ejection seat that you see there, Sandeep, all of this would indicate that the pilot at least managed to land. Whether injured or not, we do not know, but may have managed to land. There's a shadow of a person who's, taking a picture on his mobile phone. Prima facie, that may also give an impression that maybe the person who landed, the pilot who landed, or the gunner officer, the weapons officer with him, or the co-pilot with him, they've at least managed to hide for now.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And, that is part of the SOP, that when pilots go down in enemy territory, they are, supposed to hide and then make their way to a safe, landing ground where they can be picked up by the SAR.
They have
missions.
weapons, they have small arms.
They have
Usually
small
they
arms.
carry a small
Yes.
assault rifle, some ammunition, some food, some maps.
Yes.
What all do they carry, Sandeep?
Well, exactly that, what you mentioned, Gaurav. They carry survival rations. They even carry radios, for instance, encrypted radios that would help them, like a beacon that would allow the rescue forces to, home in on their position and pick them up. They will carry a small weapon, a compact assault rifle, for instance, a pistol for sure, flares even, to kind of signal their position. But right now, given the kind of pressure that is there on the ground, if the pilots are indeed, safe, they would be in a hiding away from the eyes of the Iranian ground forces that we believe are headed in their direction. So this is a very, tense situation, Gaurav. It's developing. One really doesn't know what to make of what's going on right now, except for those stray visuals that we've been able to capture, Gaurav.
And this would change the dynamics to an extent. President Trump, if he wants to make it harder, push in deeper, he would have to think of the welfare of this one pilot or these two pilots. Alternatively, would he think that perhaps there's a bigger goal that they have in mind, whether it's to ensure that Iran's unable to project power beyond its borders, to decapitate the regime, to move in further, whether to take in Kharg Island, they would bash on regardless?
Absolutely, Gaurav. Such planes, if you get into a fight, aircraft will be down. The enemy, however weak he may be, will choose to strike at you. He might bring your aircraft down, capture your pilots, but that doesn't detract from the principal aims of the operation, which, as President Trump said yesterday, was to ensure that Iran was unable to project power or, dismantle their nuclear weapons program. That seems to be on course, and that would take the US a couple of weeks now to, basically do something that will prevent Iran from either, getting nuclear weapons or having the ability to launch nuclear weapons, as in the new stated goals of the US operation are. And, Gaurav, here it must be said that the US aims and objectives through this war have constantly shifted. It wasn't the first, these were not the stated goals initially. It was regime change, and now it's come to something totally different. So, in the light of the shifting aims and objectives, one must just look at what exactly is going on the ground right now.
This would change the dynamics of this war to a very large extent. A pilot falling into the enemy hands or being out there behind enemy lines is one of the worst things that could happen in an operation, Sandeep.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And the thing is that when pilots land, they're captured by the enemy, they become propaganda tools, though there are very strict provisions of the Geneva Accords which mandate the fact that pilots are not to be used for propaganda, they're not to be mistreated or ill-treated. These have happened in wartime. We've seen that, during the Vietnam War, for instance. John McCain, one of the most celebrated US senators, was actually captured by the Vietnamese, by the North Vietnamese. He was kept in custody, he was tortured. There were many other pilots who were similarly displayed. They were paraded through the streets of Saigon. So those kind of things do happen in warfare, Gaurav. It's very unfortunate. So the US would be trying their best to deny Iran the custody of this pilot, to ensure that he's taken back safe and he's brought back, if there is a pilot or pilots, whoever they may be, to ensure that Iran does not have a propaganda tool with which to fight the US, because that will then, it's all about the headlines, it's all about the kind of visuals that come out. The US would not want something like this to come out at a very delicate stage like this.
The pressure this would mount, pressure this would mount on the US president and the Pentagon. And as an aside, so when we were covering the Kargil war in 1999, remember Wing Commander, then Squad Leader Nachiketa, MiG-27, he was shot down over Batalik and captured by the Pakistanis. Or Group Captain Abhinandan, very recently during 2019, he was captured. But that time, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and we learned that much later, didn't we, Sandeep, where in a speech much later, the Prime Minister said that Pakistan was warned all missiles were aimed at Pakistan, and Pakistan was told either you return Abhinandan immediately or aaj ki raat hogi katl ki raat. So instead of going on a bent knee to Pakistan to return our person, we threatened to obliterate, if I may use President Trump's terminology, parts of Pakistan's military establishment in case Abhinandan wasn't returned.
Yes, yes, Gaurav, and precisely for this reason that the way he was being paraded around in violation of all conventions,
the Geneva Convention,
especially the Geneva Convention, which prohibit the ill treatment of pilots, prisoners of war. Pakistan has had a history of doing that. We know what they did with Captain Saurav Kalia and his men who were patrolling the heights of Kargil. So Pakistan has had a history of doing that. So this was India's way of threatening retaliation in case they did the same with Wing Commander Abhinandan in 2019. So again, captured pilots become war trophies, they become prizes for the adversary, then to parade them around and try and, break the will of the enemy at a time when, say, the United States is planning these ground offensives. A pilot like this would become a symbol warning the United States that, look, we have one of your pilots. We could do the same if there are ground forces. So that kind of sows, the doubt in the American public, in the minds of the people, because at the end of the day, in democracies like India, maybe in the United States,
absolutely,
it is people are the center of gravity.
Every life matters,
yes.
And that's the thinking. Whether it's a democracy, like India and others. I quickly want to bring into this conversation John Rossimondo, a geopolitical and national security strategist who joins us from Washington, D.C. Dr. Wael Awad also with me on this story. John Rossimondo, your reading of reports that an F-15 pilot or pilots may have been downed, captured in Iran, or may still be at large with these missions mounted to rescue them. What are you picking up, sir?
Well, this is a war, so, there are always hazards. I think go back to the 1991 Persian Gulf War, where I think it was upwards of, 30 American, fighters or so forth were shot down, and we had many Americans who were taken prisoner of war in that war. So I think it's just a reminder that, the Iranian air defenses are degraded, but they're still not out of, the fight.
That's a very interesting point, because Dr. Wael Awad, so far, President Trump, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, they were repeatedly claiming that Iran's air defenses had been taken down, that B-2 bombers were flying over Tehran, and they were flying with impunity, Sandeep. But it just goes on to show that while that may be good propaganda, the story on ground is different, Sandeep.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And so much has happened in the last 1 month, which has, forced the world to sit up and take notice. And one big thing which I keep repeating is the fact that it's not just about the numbers of targets that have been hit by the US and Israel. It's about the resilience of the Iranian C2, the command and control, which has, managed to keep up a steady pace of firing ballistic missiles and cruise missiles and, of course, Shahid drones. Now, that is something that the US has not been able to disrupt even after 1 month of repeated bombing. That is something that a lot of countries will be looking at very closely to study how a small inferior military like Iran's has managed to protect its command and control and to ensure that it has the ability to fight an extended war of attrition. We're now in the war of attrition over a month now.
John Rossimondo into this conversation on this aspect. President Trump or Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, are they exaggerating their successes and downplaying their losses? Because when they say the B-2 bombers are flying over Tehran with impunity, 13,000 sorties flown, 16,000 targets taken down, great numbers. Tactically, you may be doing well, they may be doing well, but strategically, Iran retains the advantage, doesn't it, sir?
Well, I think that our goal is more long-term. I mean, I think that, as we call the castration strategy, which is what the people of the Defense Intelligence Agency call it, by killing all of the leaders of the regime, they're aiming for a more of a long-term, fracturing of the IRGC into warlordism and into competing factions and so forth. But in the near term, yes, they're mosaic defense, where they have every single unit of the IRGC in Iran's 31 provinces acting autonomously. Yeah, so far it's working, but will that be working 6 months to a year and a half from now as their internal fractures become more stressed?
So 6 months to a year and a half, but does America have the stomach to stay in this fight for 6 months or a year and a half, sir?
Well, I think that the focus is more in terms of psychological operations and so forth. Maybe, major operations will be wound down, whatever President Trump has next. But I'm sure there will be kind of like what we had after the 91 Gulf War, where the U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force kept a no-fly zone and kept attacking Iraq's infrastructure and attacking Iraqi missile defense sites and things of that sort.
Okay, but it's the ground operations. If they get sucked in, then that is where Iran may have that tactical advantage. But because the United States appears to be steadily laying the groundwork for a possible ground operation inside Iran. A formal and a final call may not have been made just as yet, but the number of troops that are being sent to the area, the number of weapons and systems that are being put in place. President Donald Trump has escalated the rhetoric about warning that much more will follow if Iran refuses a deal on the military front. There are key assets that are on the move, from USS George W. Bush, the aircraft carrier, to USS Boxer and Tripoli, both carrying the Marine Expeditionary Units, and that signals a very clear build-up. The US Marines, are they preparing to carry out an amphibious assault operation? Because they're carrying out drills at Diego Garcia, which is being seen as a preparation for ground incursions. We get you more in this report.
While Donald Trump says the war could be wrapped up in the next 2 to 3 weeks, his most dangerous option is still on the table. From reinforcing ground presence in the Gulf to reiterating threats, the United States has kept all signs in the open that a ground operation in Iran is not just possible but probable. The US is steadily reinforcing its ground and naval posture in the Gulf. While the USS Gerald Ford Carrier Strike Group is undergoing maintenance, the USS George H.W. Bush is in transit to the region. Backing them up, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group remains operational in the area. Meanwhile, the USS Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group is already deployed in the region with 3,500 Marines and soldiers. Now the USS Boxer, with a second Marine Expeditionary Unit with about 2,500 Marines, is also inbound. The elite paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division further boost American presence. These additional deployments will add to the 50,000 US troops stationed in West Asia, already more than usual. The United States Marines has conducted an amphibious assault training at the Diego Garcia base, raising concerns over a possible ground military operation. After bombing a major bridge near Tehran, Trump has threatened that much more is to follow, warning Iran to strike a deal before it is too late. In another post, he hailed his military, saying they haven't even begun destroying what's left in Iran. According to US media reports, Trump was recently briefed on ground troop options that included seizure of Iran's enriched uranium and ramping up recruitments on Kharg Island. The question is, will these preparations be brought to play, or will Washington use them to corner Iran into a deal? Bureau Report, India Today.
Iran too is ramping up its military preparedness amidst fears of a possible US ground invasion. It's strengthening its defenses in all key sites, including oil hubs like the Kharg Island. Reports claim Tehran has launched a massive recruitment campaign, including controversial efforts involving minors, child soldiers, but they of course are there in support roles. I want to bring in Mr. Rosmondo once again into this conversation. Ground operations next. Is it just a matter of time, sir, in your view, the way Americans are amassing men and material in the area of operation of CENTCOM?
Well, as a former top diplomat from the first Trump administration said to me recently, President Trump doesn't move things if he doesn't plan on using them. So I think that, Kharg Island is a diversion, try to get the Iranians to hoard all their troops. They're kind of like the Allies did during World War II with saying that we were going to invade France and Calais. But I think the real target are the islands in the Strait of Hormuz, because President Trump wants to get the flow of oil in and out of the straits to reassure the markets. And if the United States is able to regain control of those islands, then it can defang a lot of Iran's ability to cause mischief.
So the last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show, Sandeep, it would indicate that the Americans, and especially the A-10 Warthogs that are there, go along the Strait of Hormuz, take the mouth and some of the vital assets and vital points along the coast?
Possibly, Gaurav, because, that's what the Warthogs do. They have very good close air support platforms. They're heavily defended from ground fire, and that would be the ideal platform to operate in areas where you have relative air superiority, but you have a very large proportion of troops on the ground armed with various weapons and rockets and that would indicate an A-10 operational
The
task.
Iranians are also putting out that video saying they're recruiting, they're ready, and they're waiting. That's the video Iran has put out of recruiting more youngsters to be prepared for ground operations, and we'll track that story very closely.